or okay, then give her another one and put that over there. Go there.
Like that. But if you don't, then
Go,
the flute thing.
He does the
that's
little
fine
ones,
too.
not the
Well,
big
sorry, I have
He
to.
does the big ones.
He does the little ones.
This one.
This one. स्वभक्तचित्तरञ्जनं सदैव राममार्गयं भजे विशेषसुन्दरं जटाकलापशोभितं समस्तपापनाशकं स्वभक्तभीतिभञ्जनं भजेह राममार्गयं भजे विशेषसुन्दरं निजस्वरूपबोधकं कृपाकरं भवामहं समं शिवं निरञ्जनं भजेह राममार्गयं भजे विशेषसुन्दरं सदा प्रपञ्चकल्पितं ज्ञानानुरूपवास्तवं निराकृतिं निरामयं भजेह राममार्गयं प्रपञ्चहीननिर्मलं विकल्पहं निरामयं चिदेकरूपसङ्गतं भजेह राममार्गयं भजे विशेषसुन्दरं भवानिबोधरूपकं यशेषदेहकल्पितं गुणाकरं कृपाकरं भजेह राममार्गयं भजे विशेषसुन्दरं महर्षिवाक्यबोधकैर्विराजमानवाक्पदै सरोजजन्मसेवितं भजेह राममार्गयं शिवप्रदं सुखप्रदं भवाच्चिदं ब्रह्मावहं विराजमानदैशिकं भजेह राममार्गयं भजे विशेषसुन्दरं समस्तपापखण्डनं स्वभक्तचित्तरञ्जनं सदैव राममार्गयं भजे विशेषसुन्दरम्
Namaskar, everybody, and a good morning. First, let me thank the Matajis for their lovely song on Rama. I really liked it. Okay. Today's theme, as you know, is the journey of life. Let me begin with a passage from the Taittiriya Upanishad. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, we have a chapter on the bliss of Brahman. There we read, suppose there is a young man a noble young man, learned and virtuous, the best of rulers, firm in body and strong. And suppose the whole world full of wealth is his. That is one measure of human bliss. Then the chapter goes on to describe how worldly happiness increases 100-fold as one ascends to the different classes of celestial beings. And there are no less than a dozen of them. Finally, the bliss enjoyed by Brahma, not Brahman, Brahma, who as the cosmic mind pervades the whole universe, and in whom all the different measures of bliss culminate. The bliss enjoyed by that Brahma is the highest that one can have in the phenomenal universe. Finally, the Upanishad concludes, but even that bliss is nothing compared to the supreme bliss of Brahman, which is enjoyed only by a pure-minded soul completely free from desires. Just imagine this world of ours, with all its defects and faults, it is still extremely charming, full of things that make for our enjoyment. We are completely captivated by its pleasing sensations. Such attractive sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touches. We want to seize them and enjoy them. But the Upanishad says, compared to what we may get in the higher, finer worlds, even the highest human happiness would appear insignificant. If we knew the Vedas and believe what they say about these things, about these subtle planes of existence, we would want to enjoy the intensely pleasing things of those worlds as well. We desire the best of this world, and we would desire to get the best of those other worlds as well. And surprisingly, our Shastras show us the way of fulfilling such desires. But we need to scan our desires first, because not all of them are good. Some lead us to evil deeds which are sure to bring us misery, so we have to drop those desires if we want to be happy. Immoral or unethical actions react upon us and make us suffer, so we have to avoid them. Any desire that prompts us to commit an evil deed has to be given up. You must have heard of Vidhis and Nishedhas, injunctions and prohibitions, mainly of the Vedas. Our scriptures, the Shastras, prohibit all immoral or unethical actions because they are sure to bring us suffering. If we want to avoid misery here and hereafter, we should be careful not to go against those prohibitions. And the Shastras enjoin us to do certain meritorious deeds because they are sure to bring us happiness. If we want to enjoy happiness, we should spare no pains to carry out these injunctions. So one thing becomes obvious here. The key to happiness in this life and the next is self-control and self-sacrifice. And the ancient Hindus did go through such moral and ethical discipline in order to earn enjoyment here and hereafter. They didn't want anything for free. that it takes some amount of moral and ethical discipline for a person to be happy and well here in this life and in the next. This is an eternal truth discovered by the ancient rishis. However, what we human beings are really in search of is not happiness, it is freedom. Sooner or later, experience tells us that the senses cannot be appeased by enjoyment. It only worsens the craving. We learn that we will never attain fulfillment in this way. Even the higher and finer worlds, where we are set to enjoy unalloyed pleasure, even those worlds can't give us eternal bliss. We may go there, provided we are virtuous and have performed meritorious deeds, but that is only for a time. When the merit is spent, we come down and start over again. Really, so long as we are driven by desire, no place can give us fulfillment or freedom. But we being what we are, we may not be able to completely give up all our desires at once. What then? What happens is, when we strictly regulate our desires according to the Shastric injunctions and prohibitions, our mind becomes purified. Each time we are reborn more and more virtuous. The process goes on over and over again till our mind becomes very, very pure. And at this stage, we begin to realize the vanity and futility of all desire and enjoyment. By our own observation and experience, we become convinced that this path doesn't take us where we really want to go. We realize that what we have been seeking after all the while is something eternal, something infinite, and this path doesn't lead us there. At this point, our soul begins to look for the other path, the path of renunciation and freedom. In fact, this higher quest is the starting point of all real spirituality. The path of desire is no more than a preliminary discipline. Its purpose is to purify our mind and make us realize the emptiness of all worldly life. That is precisely its scope. So, rightly followed, the path of desire leads us to the higher path, the path of renunciation. So long as we remain attached to sense objects for our enjoyment, the divinity within remains hidden from our view. Our outward gaze has to be withdrawn and turned inward. Only then will it be possible for us to attain the perfection that we are seeking. So, our desire for enjoyment is the only hurdle on the road to perfection. This we have to cross. Then begins real spirituality. The moment we are fully free from desire, we become divine. This is the goal the path of renunciation leads to. In this path, we learn how we can root out our worldly desires, and in the process, how we can unfold our spiritual nature. So this is preeminently the path of spirituality. It is hard and long, no doubt. But if we wish to achieve the highest goal of human life, the only goal really worth striving after, then this is the only path we have to walk. The path of Tyaga and Yoga, renunciation of the world and union with God. So now, these in brief are the two main highways in the journey of life, according to the Vedas. The Pravritti marga and the Nivritti marga. Let us explore a little further and try to know more about them. On the one side, we have the path to material prosperity, and on the other, we have the path to spiritual perfection, which means that they lead in opposite directions. We find that if we want prosperity, we can't attain freedom, and if we seek perfection, we can't achieve prosperity. Not only the Vedas, but almost all great scriptures of the world assert that these two ways are contrary to each other. The Upanishad says, the good is one thing and pleasure another. And in the Dhammapada we read, one is the road that leads to wealth, another the road that leads to nirvana. And we all know the Bible saying, you can't serve both God and mammon. But the way of prosperity is not limited to the acquisition of wealth. It includes all secular pursuits, the quest for pleasure and enjoyment, power and glory, learning and prestige, fame, beauty, and so forth. All these human pursuits are concerned with the temporal, whereas spirituality is concerned with the eternal. It is spirituality that holds before us the hope of liberation from all bondage and the attainment of supreme blessedness. And the precondition for this is said to be renunciation. The Vedas themselves declare that renunciation is the sole means to supreme good. Neither by work nor by wealth, but by renunciation alone is immortality attained. So, all the great spiritual traditions are unanimous that renunciation provides the only access to the kingdom of God. Still, how many people can give up their earthly treasures for its sake? How many can turn away from temporal values to the search after the supreme good? Almost everybody chooses to keep their material possessions no matter how trivial they are. They won't risk them for the sake of perfection or freedom. Even those who have no possession or property will passionately struggle for them rather than seeking the highest good. Neither obligation nor inducement can turn anybody from the way of prosperity to the way of supreme good. Desires are too firmly entrenched within for them to submit to either of these. The thing is, the way of supreme good can't be taken up under compulsion. It's a way of inner development, the realization of our innate perfection. It has to be chosen out of free will and followed with earnestness and devotion. Those who can fulfill its conditions are extremely rare. travelers on the path of supreme good are few and far between, but the path of prosperity is always overcrowded. As we read in the Bhagavad Gita, among thousands, one here and there strives for perfection. And of those who strive and succeed, one perhaps knows God in truth. Then, is spiritual life meant only for the rare few who can forego all that is evanescent for the sake of the eternal? Can't the seekers of prosperity prepare themselves for spiritual perfection? Or must they give up all effort, all hope of entering it as long as they care for secular values? Then the overwhelming majority of human beings will have to be written off as lost souls. But that cannot be. So, for the seekers of prosperity also, there has to be a way of moving towards the ultimate goal. For them too, there must be an opening to spiritual life, and religion has to find it. The religion of the Vedas has a solution to this problem. The Vedic rishis were fully aware what a strong hold the world of experience has on human minds. So they formulated a scheme of life that includes the seekers of temporal values and well-being also. Their religion offers two distinct courses: the way of activity and the way of renunciation. The first one, Pravritti marga, is characterized by desire, and the other, Nivritti marga, by desirelessness. The former is designed to lead to enjoyment and prosperity, and the latter is intended to lead to supreme good. Now, the guiding principle of the way of activity is the practice of virtue, Dharma. In the search for wealth or pleasure, people should by no means deviate from morality. On the other hand, it must also be said that renunciation doesn't necessarily mean giving up all activities and possessions. Primarily, renunciation is a detached attitude to the temporal as a result of spiritual awakening within. It is a turning of the mind to the eternal. The main condition for the way of renunciation is freedom from desire for all that is transitory and a longing for the eternal. One can have both inner and outer renunciation, or only inner renunciation. Because outer renunciation without the inner has no value. And one may have the spirit of renunciation even though living in the family. One can be in the world without being worldly minded, though such cases are not very common. The followers of the way of activity keep passing from the lower orders of existence to the higher, and from the higher to the lower, according to their desires and actions. They repeatedly undergo the four conditions of life: birth, growth, decay, and death, with happiness and misery alternating. This transmigratory existence, with its continuously turning wheel of life driven by karma, is what is called samsara. There is no escape from samsara by the way of activity, its followers keep rolling on and on in the cosmic process of creation, preservation, and dissolution. That is why this way is called Pravritti marga, the path of turning towards. On the contrary, the followers of the way of renunciation get out of the creative order. They go beyond the world of duality and dependence. They withdraw to their innermost self and realize its unity with the Supreme Self. That is why it is called the Nivritti marga, or the path of turning away. Turning towards or turning away from what? From the center of the circle of samsara. This is how it has to be understood. So what it all amounts to is this: those who have desires keep transmigrating, and those that have no desires escape. Now, Pravritti and Nivritti are very significant terms. Contrary to popular ideas, I underline this, contrary to popular ideas, just like Pravritti, Nivritti also may involve work. Nivritti also may involve work. But Pravritti is evil work, and Nivritti is good work. Evil in the sense, Pravritti asserts and strengthens the ego. Any egocentric work, even though it may be good, honest, and pious, is a cause of bondage and therefore evil. But Nivritti is just the opposite. At its very perfection, Nivritti is absolute self-denial. Not I, but thou, O Lord, thou. The way of activity is also intended to lead to the same ultimate goal as the way of renunciation, but its immediate purpose is the attainment of material prosperity. As we just heard, it prepares one for the way of renunciation, and as such, it is an indirect approach to supreme good, an indirect cause of liberation. Though it promotes secular well-being, as an indirect means to the highest end, the way of activity paves the way to supreme good. Shankaracharya observes that for world order and security, both the ways are essential. This is something very important. Both of them are as old as humankind. Without the way of activity, the way of renunciation cannot function. And unless aimed at renunciation, activity cannot hold its own. It goes out of bounds and disrupts life, individual and social. Desires are insatiable. Unless they are properly regulated, they grow and multiply indefinitely. So, the two ways of Vedic religion are the centripetal and centrifugal forces that makes our human world run its course rightly. As you know, Pravritti is the centripetal force which is directed towards the center, and Nivritti is the centrifugal force directed away from the center. According to one definition, religion or Dharma is the law that upholds the world order. This means that the way of prosperity and the way of supreme good are both in tune with the Dharma, the law that maintains the world order. While formulating the scheme of human life, the Vedas kept in view four main objectives. As you know, what are known as the four ends of human life or the four goals of human life: virtue, wealth, enjoyment, and liberation. Wealth and enjoyment belong to the Pravritti marga, and liberation to Nivritti marga, while virtue, Dharma, is common to both. Liberation, or supreme good, is the ultimate value. The others are instrumental. They are preparatory to the knowledge knowledge of truth, which alone sets us free. Virtue is the essential condition for supreme good. No spiritual unfoldment is possible without that. Not only that, it is indispensable also for material welfare. Any progress in life, whether material or spiritual, must be based on moral worth. That is why virtue and not wealth is considered to be the primary object of human life. Such a view may not readily appeal to worldly people. To them, economic values rather than moral values are of primary importance. They think money can solve the problems of life more effectively than morality. And for gaining wealth also, they find cleverness easier than honesty. In their view, moral considerations considerably hamper worldly success. They believe they have a greater chance of becoming prosperous and happy by sacrificing moral principles than by sticking to them. Honesty may be the best policy for winning the kingdom of heaven, but not fortune. The Vedic seers, however, saw things differently. Virtue means inner excellence, inner strength or worth. It includes intellectual abilities as well. In fact, the rishis count wisdom and knowledge under virtue. Virtue consists mainly of 10 qualities: cleanliness, self-control, non-stealing, contentment, truthfulness, uprightness, forgiveness, knowledge, wisdom, and equanimity. I repeat: cleanliness, self-control, non-stealing, contentment, truthfulness, uprightness, forgiveness, knowledge, wisdom, and equanimity. According to the Vedic standard, the earlier part of life has to be devoted exclusively to the cultivation of these qualities. It emphasizes moral development much more than intellectual development. Character over cleverness. One should try to prosper in this life by discharging one's duties honestly and efficiently, because wealth or power gained by any other means is not only insecure, it is positively harmful. Outer success without matching inner development is no mark of progress. Because the secret of one's strength, wisdom, freedom, and happiness is not in external resources, but in one's own inner nature. Wealth doesn't bring wisdom. Machines don't generate moral force. Enjoyment doesn't assure happiness. So, our inner well-being is much more important than outer glory. One thing we must not forget, that our problems are mainly psychological rather than physical. Generally speaking, wealthy people suffer more misery than those who live in hardship and poverty. As long as we have moral weaknesses like lust, anger, greed, fear, pride, and hatred, we will have trouble wherever we may be. Throughout human history, people have tried to live in comfort and affluence using power and cunning, and all of them have failed sooner or later because of moral breakdown. Because of inner decay, some have even disintegrated without any blow from outside. This is a fact. So, virtue is defined as that which leads to both prosperity and the attainment of highest good. Under no circumstances should we sacrifice virtue for wealth. Moral values are far more important than material values. It is morality that makes up the stable basis also of prosperity. External possessions can't help us as much as inner resources. The Mahabharata says, virtue protects the one that protects it. In storm and stress, that alone is our best friend. This we may know for sure. People of real worth rarely fail. They can gain wealth, power, and fame even though they have none of it. On the other hand, those who have everything of this world may still lose it all if they have no self-control. It is not true that honesty and goodness don't succeed. The truth is, as Swami Vivekananda said, people don't have the patience to try it. There are people in the world who have made themselves prosperous by fair means. The secret of their success is their own personal integrity. Their moral integrity wins other people's confidence. So, the 10 virtues, these virtues have to be practiced by the seekers of prosperity as well as by the seekers of the supreme good. Student or teacher, worker or leader, farmer or trader, monk or householder, theist or atheist, nobody who wishes their own well-being can afford to ignore them. It is morality that maintains one's morale, as they say. Virtue strengthens, vice weakens. This is the simple truth. That is why the practice of virtue is the one universal duty of all human beings. Whether we believe in God or not, we must be fair in our dealings with our fellow beings. On no account should we deviate from a moral course, because without virtue, no communal life is possible. If selfishness, pride, jealousy, deceitfulness, hatred, and such other things predominate, there will always be conflict among individuals and among their groups. And in the absence of social harmony, no security, no peace, no prosperity is possible. No decent life is possible where dishonesty, arrogance, and mistrust prevail. So, even in the quest after wealth and pleasure, we must stick to the path of virtue. Otherwise, we will fail in the long run. We want to live, and live happily. For this we acquire wealth and property. The urge for enjoyment is very, very strong in us, as strong as our instinct for survival. We try to get the utmost pleasure even from the essential needs of life: food and drink, clothes and bed, house and furniture. We want even these simple things to be as pleasant, as enjoyable as we can make it. And still we are not satisfied. We surround ourselves with comfort and luxuries, but nothing can make us happy unless we are in a position to enjoy them. Two things essential for the enjoyment of life are a healthy body and a sound mind. If we are physically weak or mentally sick, we can't relish anything. And unless we live with self-restraint and moderation, nothing can ensure physical and mental health. A virtuous person, on the other hand, can be happy with the bare necessities of life, because the body and mind are in a normal state. By dishonest means, I may become rich, but I can't become happy. My mental disquiet will not let me find joy anywhere. In the name of enjoyment, I become self-indulgent, and excitement is followed by exhaustion. Even in enjoyment, I have to exercise judgment and moderation. Whatever is pleasant may not necessarily be good. Any excess will have an unhappy reaction. So, the seeker of happiness should never overstep virtue. Happiness comes from virtue and suffering from vice. As long as we nurse any ill feeling for our fellow beings, anger, jealousy, hatred, pride, fear, any negative feeling, we can't have peace of mind. So, all our secular pursuits should be in accordance with virtue. This is the rule laid down by the Vedas on all seekers of prosperity, the followers of the way of activity. Pravritti margis. When the way of activity is rightly practiced, it invariably leads to the path of renunciation, the path of supreme good or moksha. Now, let us examine our world. What is mainly responsible for its present predicament? Of course, it has always been in some predicament or other. But why? In one of his books, Swami Satprakashanandaji points out, the cause is people's open disregard of virtue in realizing their worldly ambitions. We are not interested in strengthening the bonds of universal harmony, but we are prepared for wars in the name of self-defense. It is not ideological difference or cultural diversity or economic maladjustment that is the main cause of this tragic situation. There is something deeper at the root. People believing in the same ideology or having the same culture or belonging to the same religion also quarrel and fight among themselves. So, ideological, cultural, or religious unity alone cannot solve the problem. Economic disparity is frequently cited as a cause of conflict, but even that originates mainly in greed. So, on the whole, people have subordinated ethical values to moral values, values to material values, and this has resulted in a lack of moral integrity in their lives. And this is the source of all the major troubles in today's world. Satprakashanandaji says we only need to look at the history of the last 300 years, and we will see how the optimistic vision of progress has received one shock after another. He clearly traces how the destructive effects of the materialistic outlook all appeared in logical succession. Greed for wealth and power, industrialism, capitalism, exploitation, colonization, imperialism, materialism, and war, one leading to the next. And all that optimism and vision turned into disillusionment with the explosion of the A-bomb. This is Satprakashanandaji's observation. So evidently, the optimists had lost sight of some important truths. They largely identified human happiness with material advancement. It didn't occur to them that enjoyment doesn't necessarily make people happy. Happiness depends primarily on spiritual factors rather than on physical factors. Even the assumption that moral development should go hand in hand with intellectual development and material prosperity, even that is wrong because it is not a fact. Not only prosperous, but even highly intelligent people are often found to be morally deficient. Material success or intellectual keenness are no marks of moral growth. On the other hand, without moral purity, intellect does not develop into insight. Human problems can't be solved by an intellect that has no insight. Our rational nature depends on our moral goodness more than moral goodness depends on our rational nature. The faculty of reason, of which we are so proud, it can't function properly or fully until the mind is more or less free from emotional involvements. Rationality doesn't spring from mere mental sharpness, as it is often assumed. To be able to see things rightly and clearly, one has to overcome propensities, subdue one's passions. As a matter of fact, rational life in the real sense doesn't grow without the cultivation of virtue. Righteousness brightens the intellect, just as unrighteousness darkens it. So, when judging a person's material achievements, we must never make the mistake of overlooking their moral stature. Material progress unrelated to moral development is meaningless. In the first place, what is progress? Progress means movement towards a desirable and beneficial end. Without the ethical content, it has no meaning. Material life is insecure without a moral basis, and moral life is insecure without a spiritual basis. So even material well-being finally depends on spirituality. This is the lesson that underlies life's twofold journey. I'll be developing on this theme in my next talk. So that is all for today. Now I have a couple of announcements to make. Next Sunday, we'll be hosting a guest lecturer. Next Sunday is 26th March. Dr. Jeffrey Long, whom you all probably know well, he will be visiting here and give a talk on the subject of what makes the four yogas work. Swami Vivekananda's philosophy of yogic pluralism. Please make sure not to miss this talk. And then we have this much awaited closing program of our center's Jubilee year. That will be from between the 31st of March and the 2nd of April. Swamis Chetananandaji, Sarvadevanandaji, Prapannanandaji, Nirmalatmanandaji, Ishtatmanandaji, Tattvamayanandaji, and Pravrajika Shuddhatma Pranaji. All these revered Swamijis and Mataji will be coming to our center and addressing us. And on Sunday night, Sunday is 2nd, on the concluding evening, there will be a sitar concert by Sri Shibashish Laha. So we have placed flyers on the table outside, and the full schedule is also available on our website. Please take a copy of the flyers and also go through our website for all the information you need. So now, will we have a closing song? Do we have time? Yeah, we have time. Anything. Thank you.
একবার বিরাজো গোমা হৃদি কমলাসনে, একবার বিরাজো গোমা হৃদি কমলাসনে, তোমার ভুবন ভরা রূপ কি একবার দেখে লই মানয়নে, ভুবন ভরা রূপ কি একবার দেখে লই মানয়নে, কমলাসনে একবার বিরাজো গোমা হৃদি কমলাসনে, তুমি অন্নপূর্ণা শ্মশানে শ্যামা, কৈলাসেতে উমা তুমি বৈকুণ্ঠে রমা, তরুবীরিঞ্চি শিব বিষ্ণু রূপ সৃজনলয় পালনে, বিরিঞ্চি শিব বিষ্ণু রূপ সৃজনলয় পালনে, কমলাসনে একবার বিরাজো গোমা হৃদি কমলাসনে, তুমি পুরুষ কি নারী বুঝিতে নারী, স্বয়ং না বুঝালে তাকি বুঝিতে পারি, তুমি আধা রাধা আধা কৃষ্ণ কমলাসনে একবার বিরাজ গো মা হৃদি কমলাসনে দুঃখ দৈন হারিণী চৈতন্য কারিণী অন্য কিছুই চাই না বিনা চরণ দুখানি আমি প্রেম সরোজে সাজাবো পথ বাসনা মনে মনে প্রেম সরোজে সাজাবো পথ বাসনা মনে মনে কমলাসনে একবার বিরাজ গো মা হৃদি কমলাসনে পরিব্রাজ ভিখারি সাধুনেতে হারি মধুর হাসি মাখা মার মুখখানি বসে মায়ের